This weekend, the AFL were handing out records like there was no tomorrow. Welcome to the Sports Playbook. I'm Daniel, and we are Australia's weekly sports news podcast covering men's and women's sports. So here's everything that happened this weekend in sports. In AFL, records tumble over two matches. North Melbourne completed the second biggest comeback in AFL history. They were down by 43 points during the second quarter, and with a kick after the siren, they defeated the Gold Coast Suns by 6 points. The Geelong Cats, they defeated the Sydney Swans by a 27-point margin, and with that win, that has knocked the Sydney Swans off the top of the table. The Fremantle Dockers, they beat St Kilda by 30 points. They have now recorded their 10th victory in a row, and they are now top of the AFL ladder. Collingwood beat West Coast Eagles by 10 points in Scott Pendlebury's record-breaking game, 433 games. But that victory, it wasn't without trouble, as Jamie Elliott, Nick Dacos, Darcy Moore and Will Hayes, all of them were injured throughout this match. Carlton have won back-to-back games, defeating Port Adelaide by 34 points. And the GWS Giants smashed the 2025 premiers, the Brisbane Lions, by 78 points. In the process, they scored 86 points in the third quarter alone. Not only was that a club record, but that was the highest third quarter score ever in AFL history. In NRL, Manly continue their impressive run. For new coach Kieran Foran, he has led Manly to an incredible run of 7 wins from 8 games. They defeated the Gold Coast Titans 12-10 at Brookvale Oval. And due to multiple teams having the bye this weekend because of State of Origin, only 4 other games of football were played. The Dolphins beat the Raiders by 8 points, and the Bulldogs recorded a massive upset, defeating the Storm also by 8 points. Whilst the Warriors continue the Dragons' losing streak, defeating them 30-12, and the Cowboys got a crucial win against the Rabbitohs 30-18. In netball, the biggest winning margin ever in Super Netball history, the Adelaide Thunderbirds kicked off the weekend and they defeated the Giants 70-37, which is the biggest winning margin in Super Netball history. And for the Giants, they have not won a game all season. And with 3 rounds to go, it'll be a tough task to see where the Giants can get a victory in 2026. For the Melbourne Mavericks, they have now cemented their position in the top 4, defeating the Lightning by 10 goals. The West Coast Fever bounced back from last week's defeat to beat the Firebirds by 18 goals, whilst the Melbourne Vixens won the Sergeant McInnes Cup, defeating the New South Wales Swifts by 10 goals. And a massive shout out to Giants debutante Eva Canero. She was born in 2009. That makes Eva 16 years of age, and she made her debut in the goal defence position for the Giants. Massive congratulations to Eva. In football, Auckland FC win the A-League title. Auckland FC created history, becoming the first New Zealand team to win the A-League competition. They defeated Sydney FC 1-0 in the final. And for Auckland coach Steve Corica, he also created history with that victory. He now becomes the first coach to record 3 A-League Grand Final victories. Ironically, the other 2 titles came through Sydney FC. And the only goal scored throughout the final was Cam Howison, who is the Auckland FC's inaugural signing, which is a nice touch for this team. In Formula 1, both Mercedes drivers come to blows. As we record this, it is Sunday, the 24th of May. So when this podcast comes out, the Grand Prix result will be finalised, but I don't have that at this point. At the Canadian Grand Prix, George Russell and Kimi Antonelli started the sprint race on the front row. But throughout the race, Russell forced Antonelli wide and Antonelli ran onto the grass. He not only lost time, but Lando Norris became the beneficiary and finished second in the sprint race. It was a tense moment for the Mercedes pair, who haven't seen a championship fight quite like this within their own stable since 2016. For George Russell, he will start the main Grand Prix on pole position alongside Kimi Antonelli on the front row. And for Oscar Piastri, the Australian, he will start the Grand Prix out of 4th position. And in athletics, Abbey Caldwell takes out a Diamond League victory. The middle distance runner had a huge career breakthrough, taking out her first Diamond League title overnight in China. In the 1500 metre event, Caldwell ran a tactically perfect race with a winning time of 3 minutes and 57 seconds. And for Caldwell, her next event meet for the Diamond League will be in Europe on June 4th. That was your weekend results roundup. So now it's time to head into our main story. This week's main story is the Melbourne Mavericks on their way to potentially a finals berth. Against the Lightning, the Mavericks showed why they are capable of potentially making their first final series. Whilst it wasn't a high score during the netball game, the Mavericks have learnt their lesson from earlier games in the season. Traditionally, the Mavs were excellent in the first quarter, getting out by a strong margin before letting teams come back into the game in the third and fourth quarter. But against the Lightning, who were the closest on the ladder to taking a top 4 position, they had the most goals scored during the fourth quarter, 19-12, and went on to defeat the Lightning by 10 goals. This matters because for the first time in their club's history, it would see them make the final series after only being in the competition for less than 3 years. And with new coach Gerard Murphy and players such as Jamie Lee Price and Matty Hay, this would truly take the Melbourne Mavericks to the next step. What comes next? For the Mavericks, with 3 rounds to go, if they win at least 2 of these games, they will secure a final spot. They will have their 2 toughest games in the next fortnight, up against the West Coast Fever before the Melbourne Derby against the Melbourne Vixens. Their final game at home will be against the Queensland Firebirds, one to watch in the coming weeks. Well, you might ask, what is the state of play? Well, after the weekend results, here are the key updates. In AFL, Fremantle are now the standalone leader in the competition from the Sydney Swans, who now sit in second position. They are followed by Geelong, Hawthorn, the Gold Coast Suns and the Demons, rounding out the top 6. In the NRL, the Panthers remain on top, followed by the Warriors, the Roosters and Manly rounding out the top 4. The Knights, Rabbitohs, Dolphins and the Sharks conclude the top 8. In netball, the Adelaide Thunderbirds lead the competition, but they are on equal points to the Melbourne Vixens, but the Thunderbirds have a better goal difference. The West Coast Fever sit in 3rd position, while the Melbourne Mavericks round out the top 4. And for the Mavericks, they are now 2 games clear of 5th position. One to watch this week before the weekend preview is State of Origin. On Wednesday, the 27th of May, it is New South Wales against the Queensland Maroons in the Men's State of Origin starting at 8 p.m. It'll be held at a core stadium in Sydney and is crucial for both sides to win this game 1. For New South Wales, they will have home ground advantage, but for Queensland, they will always have their tails up, as Queensland like to have the underdog status going into the 2026 State of Origin series, one to watch for sport fans. That was your Monday wrap. On Thursday, I'll be back with the week's big stories and everything coming up this weekend. If you're listening, please send this podcast to one more person who's never listened to the Sports Playbook before. That would be greatly appreciated. So until then, follow the Sports Playbook. We are your go-to for fast sport news without the noise. You can follow us on Instagram and on TikTok and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. See you next time.